All right, welcome back again, everybody. I hope that you are all feeling good, have learnt a lot, and made some new connections today. I won't waste any more of your time because when we had our first contact with this keynote, I immediately had to play it very cool because of how excited I was as I had just been playing one of the games that she worked on literally a week beforehand. She started her career as one of the first women to write and produce at Riot Games on League of Legends, contributing to champions including Lux, Sona, Talon, and Trundle. Sorry if I said any of those wrong. I don't play any League of Legends. She went on to launch over 50 titles in a variety of roles: narrative designer, writer, editor, marketing and communications director, event producer, and more we could list, but we might be here all evening. The lead narrative designer and writer on Pacific Rim. I'm so sorry. I'm thinking about robots. On Pacific Drive. Her work has been praised as funny and compelling by Games Radar, exquisite by Screen Rant, and heartfelt by Dread Central. Today, she'll be taking us through utilizing storytelling beyond just the written word, what to do when you have limited time and space, and how to make a pitch to players and investors that will get them hooked. Please welcome to the stage, Karrie Shirou.
Thank you, Sav. Thank you for the promotion to be writing Pacific Rim instead of Pacific Drive. I'll take either, honestly, that's great. Hi, Melbourne, it's amazing to be here. I come to you today on day 2 of GCAP with a confession to make. I'm a writer, and I hate reading in games. When I start a game, I'm 100% here for the gameplay. I want to optimize a factory. I want to go online and punch people. I want to shoot enemies with the tears of a naked baby trying to escape being sacrificed by his mother. Binding of Isaac, anyone? Yes, okay. On the other hand, if I'm in the mood to experience a well-written story, I will look for something on Netflix. I'll go through my Goodreads queue. I will always turn to film or TV or books first. Booting up a game, again, when I'm in the mood for a good story, is not really on my radar. And does that mean that I think games are bad at telling stories? No, not at all. Sometimes, but not always. Not overall. There are games that have affected me in ways that movies never have or will. I can still remember the moment I was forced to keep chopping fish, fill a bathtub, press L3 and R3 to poke out a Greek god's eyeballs, despite every fiber of my being screaming at me to not do it. These moments challenged me morally, emotionally, and physically. They are unforgettable, and to this day, I remember how they made me feel. And games are the only medium to do that. They connect, the emotional, the moral moments of fiction to a physical act. They are entrenched memories for me, as if I experienced them myself. And so why? Why, even with these experiences, do I not turn to games for story? That's me. The answer for me, at least, is because I'm the type of player you have to make experience the story. I'm here to button mash. I'm not here to read. But if you can make me experience the story while I'm doing that, if you can make me feel something, then I will be the biggest advocate for your game. And that doesn't mean there can't be text. It just means you have to use it smartly, sparingly, and succinctly. And most important, you have to make sure the entire gameplay experience is telling you the story. If the mechanics and the audio, atmosphere, mood, everything is informing you about the story, that's when you kind of have all your elements together. If I don't read a word, but I can look at all of these things and tell you the story, then that, to me, is success. And as far as what you can do about it, whether you're a developer, a publisher, a marketer, I will share with you for the next hour what I've learned about storytelling through my career. Let me start at the beginning by way of a quick introduction. I'm Karrie Shirou Shao. I've worked in games for 14 years now across a lot of different fields. I got my start in games at Riot, where I was one of the first female producers and writers. After Riot, I pivoted into agency work where I was a marketing and PR director, publishing producer, and event producer for some of the coolest projects ever. Space Channel 5 VR, The Binding of Isaac Rebirth, BlazBlue Cross Tag Battle, Sayonara Wild Hearts, Psychonauts 2, the list goes on and on. When I was in-house at Tiny Build, I worked publishing side on games like Hello Neighbor, Graveyard Keeper, and Streets of Rogue. Throughout my career, I touched so many games, either by working on them directly or helping them launch. And in doing that, I learned about what games stood out from the crowd, which games sold, which didn't, and about where it was smart to spend your team's time. And I'm here to share some of that with you today. But as far as where I got started, I never knew what I wanted to do growing up. I spent a lot of time floundering through college and in my first few jobs post-college. At least that's how I remember it. But truthfully, when I look back, I was always writing. From grade school, I was always writing. All those years I spent spinning my wheels, being like, I don't know what to do, waste of time, I knew it. But the combination of strict parents, as well as a disbelief that writing was a real career, it led me to get my sensible engineering college degree. But though I knew that I wasn't going to spend my life in a national lab, I wasn't going to be a rocket scientist, which is what the reasonable end path was for that degree. I knew that I wanted to be creative, though, so I spent years working a corporate job while throwing my resume at job openings in games, until one company finally emailed me back and offered me a job. I was a few years into my professional corporate job at this point, well paid, but starting down the path of being like having the golden handcuffs to my respectable but boring career. And the job offer I got in games was an unpaid internship. The company openly acknowledged that it was not a path to hire. It was largely an admin position. And this company, I'd never heard of it before. They released a game, but no one I knew was playing it. And I also found this job on Craigslist. Okay, so you all know what Craigslist is here. This is what it looks like if you don't. It's awesome. I guess you do have local Craigslist here in Australia, but it's pretty much a ghost town. You don't really use it here, certainly not in 2024. And I just really want to appreciate the vibes of this website. This is what the internet looked like in the late 1990s, and they have refused to update it in any way. Just no vibes, just text only, anything from job postings to poorly disguised illegal classifieds to people who haven't slept in 5 days, it's all on here. And these are all real posts from Melbourne's Craigslist. And it's a good representation of how deeply sketchy this place is. And again, this is where I got this unpaid internship job offer. So I was weighing all this at the time. But in the end, the offer was for a game company. It was in its production department, and it was the only chance anyone ever gave me. I was very lucky to have graduated debt-free from college thanks to my parents. And I saved enough money from said corporate jobs to actually take this plunge into 3 months without pay. It's not a luxury most people have. And I was grateful that I set myself up for that, but with the great support and the privilege of having parents who helped me through college. And so I did that. I took the job. And luckily, in the world's greatest stroke of luck, that company was Riot Games. I did well enough at my internship that I did get hired afterwards. At my time there, I produced League of Legends' first new gameplay modes since launch. So that was co-op versus AI and Dominion. We were laying the groundwork for the Dominion game mode. I wrote on a few beloved champions and was the on-camera host for the Season 1 Championship livestream. And Riot was an amazing place to work as a first job in games. It's a design and gameplay first environment, and so it was a great crash course for me. And especially when I was on the narrative team, that was my first lesson about the value of telling stories beyond just written text. Do I have any current League of Legends players here? Raise a hand. Okay, great, awesome. How about recovering League of Legends players? Yes, my people. That's where I am these days with League. Who knows who this character is? Name? Anyone? Yell it out. Caitlin. What's her job? Sheriff of Piltover. Okay, what about this one? Amumu. What region are they from? Shurima. And what do you know about their backstory? There it is, yes, perfect. Okay, good. Lastly, what about these two? Kale and Morgana, awesome. Okay, so on the right side here is Morgana. If you wanted to know more about her character, here's what you can find. all of this text. So on the upper left, you've got the character bio. That's a short 75 words. Underneath it, that's her full bio. You could click through. That's 778 words. Most champions have a short story or two attached to them. That's on the right there, and that's just under 1,400 words. Luckily, she is one of the champions with a direct relation to another character. So if you wanted to find out more about her, you could read her sister Kale's bio for another 800 or more words about who she is. Some characters, the more popular ones, are lucky enough to get their own comics. They're kind of expanding into that these days. Sadly, Morgana does not have that, so this is kind of what you have about if you wanted to read Morgana's lore. But the main demographic of League of Legends players are hardcore players. They log into the League launcher and they get straight into the match. They already know the character they want to play. They already know the build the items they're going to build onto this character. And if a new champion gets announced, they will look at the character's abilities, they'll look at those patch notes, but they're not reading the bio for the most part. So what ends up happening if I ask you, or if I ask most players what Morgana's story is, here's what they're going to say. She's some sort of fallen angel who uses dark magic, and she hates her sister. That's kind of the extent of most of the lore you're going to know about her. And why do these players know that? Where do they get this information? It's because they go into game and they spend hours listening to her voice lines. They know the name of her abilities and see those like dark magic particles that she uses. Anytime Morgana nears her sister in the game map, they'll have custom voice lines that acknowledge each other. And that's the top level of it. That's the deepest many players go. So this was, back when I worked at Riot, and still is, the mismatch between how players interact with your game and if they engage with the available lore out there. And this is just a quick look at what League looked like 14 years ago, which is the time of when I worked there. League had only released 5 months prior to my joining, so it was committed to this brand new idea of releasing champions every 2 weeks. And it was a huge test of can we survive on this free-to-play game where we sell only skins. It was a big experiment at the time, again, 2010, 2011 era. We were not a household name by any means. I remember how giddy the studio was when a producer went home for Thanksgiving and saw someone like playing League of Legends at the airport on horrible airport Wi-Fi. And that was like amazing. That was the first time we saw it in the wild. When I joined the company, we were about 60 people. Heroes of Newerth was our main competition. And we were watching like World of Warcraft across the aisle, daydreaming about the day we'd become a household name. During my time there, we launched season 1, and we also announced a championship tournament where we broke records by offering an earth-shattering, unseen at the time, prize pool of $100,000. That is barely anything now, right? Now, this is before the rise of esports, before Valve came down and slammed down $3 million for the International, before Epic brought in the $15 million Fortnite prize pool. Like, this was very, very different in 2010. And back then, we were very scrappy. Again, 60 people at this company. The community team was in charge of filming videos at our office. The entire narrative and writing team consisted of about 4 people. And 3 of us split our time between writing and our actual jobs that we were doing in production and player support. And it was there I got my crash course in game development. And again, it was an environment where design was king. Where everything we did was led by design-first principles. And that came with a whole lot of trial and error in everything we were doing, especially narrative and writing. On the left here, this is what our patch previews used to look like. That's Tamat, Ginsu, and Freak sitting like right at the front door of our old office, the conference room behind them. And then on the right side, the guy in the green shirt there, that's Lomar. He's the reason the Broloff skin exists. And he also happened to be Riot's lawyer. If you can put those 2 things together, Broloff and literally our legal representation. And then the guy sitting at the table to his left with the green headphones, he looks really bored. That's Alex Yee. He's the co-creator of Arcane. So went from this horribly filmed, like low standard definition video that was promoting a skin release to Arcane. And the lore I'm going to talk about today is very different from what you may know now. In the timeline of League, all of this happened all of the lore I'm going to share with you is the lore at the time of the game's launch. This was before the 2014 lore reboot, before all the champion reworks, and before last year's push to canonize the many threads of the Riot universe. And one thing remained the same from that time till now. We never had more attention from fans than when we revealed the next champion joining the game. So we had that 2-week release cadence. We would breadcrumb the champion details. We would start with teaser images, eventually reveal full art, character abilities, and then lore in the form of a 300-word character bio. That bio was not a lot of room to work with, so we came up with a framework to write a short story alongside. In this era of game lore, the League of Legends was a peaceful way to settle regional conflicts. So the champions were these in-world characters that were inducted to fight in the League. Each character joining the game had to pass a test of characters to join, and these tests were the basis of these short stories we wrote called the League Judgments. They're somewhat similar to the current short stories you can find in League. They were character-expanding short fiction, and by releasing these early, people hungry to know more about the incoming champion would possibly read these stories, like possibly engage with the lore that we had. Another way we teased future updates to players was through an in-world newsletter called the Journal of Justice. Every 2 weeks, we would release a fictional newsletter that you could click into from the client. We would report on political conflicts in the world of Runeterra or the latest artifacts found in Ezreal's expeditions. And if you paid attention, what we were actually doing was previewing new items getting patched into the game. We would tease new characters sometimes and occasionally lay down the breadcrumbs for a whole new game mode announcement. We started dripping in news about a conflict in a town called Kalamanda. It was a political and military powder keg waiting to erupt between the two of the world's foremost powers, Demacia and Noxus. We built out this story for months, and we revealed that Kalamanda was the site for League's first new game mode, what would eventually be released as Dominion, the new Capture the Flag game mode. And between the champion judgments and the Journal of Justice, this is how we tied lore into the game's releases and marketing. We created a trail of content to tease out eventual releases. But as much as we try to find avenues for the players hungry for this information, as much as we try to do that, these items all eventually got axed. Again, we were a writing team of 4, and the view count of these lore pieces did not justify the amount of time we were spending on them. All of this work was available to players, but optional, right? Most of them still did end up ignoring the lore and continuing to play. I think it had a lot of value, though. I think it gave people the breadcrumbs to dig through while they were waiting for the new champions, and they could, theory craft about what we were doing. And that was absolutely successful in that regard. But these benefits were not tangible enough. They were immeasurable. And the powers that be wanted to explore more integrated ways to get hardcore players into the lore. And we had a lot of ideas for that, but again, this is a time where we were just trying to make sure the servers stopped falling over. So we didn't really have engineering support. We didn't have art support. And so we came up with the idea of a story match. This was a way to basically get players invested in what was going to happen in the game, right? So in the world of Runeterra, there's a collection of islands called Ionia, which is the home of champions like Aurelia, Master Yi, and Lee Sin if you play. In the lore, Ionia is an occupied land ruled over by the Kingdom of Noxus, which is home to Katarina, Draven, and LeBlanc. And the basis of this story match would be Ionia challenging Noxus to win back their independence. Ideally, this would be a setup that everybody who played League of Legends could participate in, right? We also threw around the idea of what if whoever won the match, like a champion from that world, would enter the game, and that would be so cool. But again, the art team was just barely releasing 2 champions or 1 champion every 2 weeks, so we couldn't do that. So the extent of what we could do was this. We built up the conflict in that Journal of Justice, that newsletter, over months. We announced League's first story match. We selected 10 players from the community and pit them against each other. Each team of players could only choose from the pool of champions from their represented region, and then we streamed the match live with color commentary. And the event went really well. Again, this happened before the rise of LCS and Twitch streams, so live professional League of Legends matches were really rare to see. We're also super lucky that we got help from the design department, and Colt Hallam, better known as Ezreal, the designer who designed a lot of the original launch champions in the game, designed 2 items that the winning team would get to choose to put into the game. So people watched the match live because it was, 1, an official rare stream, and 2, because whatever item that got added into the game by the winning team was exciting, and people would have opinions about what item would get added and also how it would affect their own builds in the game. And the winning team was Ionia, and the item they chose is the Ionian cooldown boots, essentially, and that item is still in the game today. There's flavor text on the item that is a callback to this event. And again, all of this stuff was really great for us, but it was very manually put together, and it laid the groundwork for a way for the community to get invested in lore stuff. This evolved into the more involved events that you see now, like the Star Guardian event. If you break down that event, it's a smart mix of sales, there's an event pass and skins related to an event, player retention, you earn rewards if you play games during this timed event. Rewards like custom items and icons and emotes, and lore. They made a whole visual novel for the events that would come later. That type of 360-degree event requires a whole lot of buy-in from a lot of different teams. We didn't have that at the time, but I believe the story match really laid the foundation for that. And fast forward to nowadays, Riot has so many ways they're integrating lore. You have these special interaction VO where champions talk to each other on the field when they encounter another lore-relevant character. There are missions and skin tie-in events, like with the release of Seraphine over at the right. It's hard to see, but the character is an aspiring pop star. So if you play and win games as Seraphine or certain other characters during this timed event, the mission would earn you rewards and allow you to progress her story. So she would go from just like, an amateur into her eventual pop star outfit. There's so much great work that Riot Games is doing now with narrative. And if you look into it, it's all serving the economy of skins and sales. It's keeping players in the game and getting them to play during these timed events and wrapping it in story as a way to motivate that. And I think that if you're looking for ways to really meld gameplay and story together, there's no better example than what work Riot is doing nowadays in their game. But I will say, I'm going to flip back to the same timeline you saw earlier. Knowing all that, the question of how to present your story to hardcore players, as well as where it's best to use your writer's time, it's still in flux. Last year, in 2023, they made a canonization announcement where they were declaring their intent to move away from written short stories and focus on storytelling through other mediums. And which means, even if you know what the problem is, it's a hard thing to solve. 13 years later, after my experience there, they're still working on it. And that's, not a dig at them. This is genuinely a hard thing, but they're trying so many interesting things. After I left Riot, I went on to the games industry, to work in the games industry for a number of clients, which I'll talk about in a bit. The entire time, though, I was honoring my first love, which was writing, and specifically writing novels. Over the course of 6 years, I wrote 4 manuscripts, full-length works, to stretch my writing muscle and learn a lot of lessons about plot and structure and character the hard way. My first novel was a throwaway slice of life, like I watch way too much anime type of high school drama. And my second novel was a young adult paranormal romance that I truly believe every writer has got one. You just got to get it out of your head. Since you're asking, it was a teenage vampire romance, but totally cooler and totally different, not much edgier than Twilight for sure. Says every writer ever. But it wasn't until my third novel that I started to get serious and write something with the goal to publish it. So for the next 2 novels 3 and 4, I wrote it and edited it beginning to end and sent it around to literary agents. And in writing those 4 books, I learned a whole lot, and the lesson that struck me the hardest was something that I use for game development. It is relevant to both the craft of writing as it is to pitching a game, and even when you're just starting a fun prototype on your own. And that lesson is write your query first. The path to publishing a novel, the traditional way, goes like this. You get an idea, something strong enough that you're willing to grind on for a good year or more of your life. You write this novel. It's a 60,000 word minimum piece. If you're writing young adult, that's about 200 printed book pages. And then you edit and polish that piece of work until you think it is ready to go out into the wild and get published. You do all of this before you even breathe in an agent's direction. That's a good year's worth of work if you happen to be a quick writer and editor, which I am not, so that usually stretches into multiple years. I'll say that again. You write, you edit, you finish your novel before you talk to a single agent. This is crazy. Can you imagine if you had to basically finish your game before you even started talking to a publisher about it? That is completely unsustainable, and yet that is how you write novels in the fiction world. You take your manuscript, you start emailing agents, and then you just sit on your hands, you fight the demons of self-doubt, and you just curse your choice of career. You essentially become these people. There's a reason why this trope of a filthy, drunk, depressed writer exists, because this is the process. But back into it, so when I said you get to email these agents after you finish your book, what you're really sending them is not your book. It's not your finished, wonderful, polished thing. It is a 300-word back of the book summary, which is called a query. Based only on the strength of these 300 words, will the agent then decide, hey, maybe I'll crack open this Word file you sent me. And so that query summary, that's your elevator pitch. And writing that is a completely different skill than writing a whole novel. The format looks something like this. This is abstracted a lot. This is the three-body problem, if anyone's ever read the first book. Every query contains these essential elements in various orders. You have a main character, an inciting incident that kicks off the story. There's an overview of the plot's various twists and turns. You state what the escalating conflicts are, what the stakes are, what happens to your hero if they don't get what they want, and what the theme or lesson learned is. If you look at any back of your book, this is what you're going to see laid out. And if anyone has worked in film, you'll see this echoed as a log line. This is another format for a pitch where you represent your story in 1 to 2 sentences. The goal is to convey the essence of the plot and also entice the reader. And the two major components of a good log line are irony and a compelling mental image, as you can see in these examples here of films you might recognize. And the thing that I really want to point out that really illuminated this pitching process for me is that you want to convey what it is you're making, but you also have to entice them with something that compels their imagination to fill in the gaps. That moment where you tell someone your pitch and then they get excited and they start talking and they take over and they're like, oh my gosh, I see how that could work. I can see how this turns into that. You're gold. If you get that excitement out of them, then your pitch is working. And an interesting thing happened when I was submitting my novels to agents in writing my query, writing my logline and pitches. I found problems with my novel. Once I wrestled down this 200-page novel and extracted my pitch elements, I found I didn't have clearly communicated stakes or why it was a physical or emotional life or death situation for my main character. In writing my pitch, I found out what was wrong with my book. So by the time I wrote my next 2 novels, I learned this lesson, and before I set down a single word, as I was outlining the book and carving out the shape of what it would be, I wrote and polished and honed my pitch first. And this is what I do when I make my games now, or write my games, or pitch games to press, or recommend games on Word for funding or publishing. I ask, what is the pitch? Is it compelling? If I have 10 seconds or 2 sentences to tell a stranger what this game is, what do I say to them to make them pick up their phone and buy it? My process in developing a new project is now this. I start by writing my pitch in either the 300-word query format or my logline, and only after I feel really solid about that pitch and I field tested it with a few people will I then start to write my book or make my game. And as I go through the weeds of development, once I'm starting to make this thing, I look right back at the pitch every once in a while and I ask, is this the thing I'm currently making? If not, am I making something better than my original pitch? Or is it just different? If it's better, amazing. Go back and update that pitch. Make sure what you're selling and what the intrigue of your game or project is top line. And if you find that what you're making isn't better than your original pitch, maybe you catch yourself, maybe you go back and see what's diverging and use that as your North Star and your measuring stick. And I will say here that it is likely a good thing if your pitch changes throughout this process. Your pitch is often the pure form of your idea, and as I'm sure everyone here knows, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. No beautiful gem of your idea stays true necessarily when you get pulled down into the mire of mechanics and execution. But if my message was make sure you have a good pitch, then I wouldn't be saying anything new to you here. What I'm saying is write your pitch first, then compare back to it constantly. Update it if the changes passed muster, and only if you think the new thing you have honors a better sales pitch. The process from going from idea to written story or from pitch to finished game is long and twisted road, and your end thing will never look like the perfect untarnished version you have in your head. But if you keep a pitch in mind, it'll come out better. So while I wrote novels and learned these incredibly, there's a slide missing, that's fine. While I wrote novels and learned these incredibly valuable lessons about pitching, I worked along a whole smattering of incredible games, many that became bestsellers, others that didn't hit the mark, and sadly wonderful games that deserved a lot more attention than they got. I spent 7 years on the agency and publishing side and learned tons about marketing and pitching and PR. At this time, I crossed paths with absolute giants from my work creating and producing booths for Psychonauts 2 and many of Annapurna Interactive's games. I worked alongside Hironobu Sakaguchi, the father of Final Fantasy, on his mobile titles, Terra Battle and Terra Battle 2. I worked with Mineko Okumura, who's the voice of Space Channel 5's Ulala, and she was the game's original producer, and 25 years later, she started her own studio to bring Space Channel 5 to VR. I got to do all these amazing things, including writing the proudest press release headline of my career for the Binding of Isaac's Rebirth's soundtrack release. I literally got to research fart jokes for a professional job. Don't let anyone tell you that working in video games is not some of the most fun you can ever have in a career. That says, you can download an immediate brownload. That's so good. In my time that I spent both at my agency, Strangely Compelling, and Tiny Build, that time spent on the marketing and PR side of games was really answering the question of discoverability. How do I get press and players and random people on the side of the street to pay attention to a game? And once they pay attention, what makes them stick around? It turns out that the lessons I learned writing and pitching novels and developing League of Legends absolutely applied here too. You're pitching the idea of a game to someone before they ever get hands on it. Your best chance of doing that is having those same two things from the logline up front and present in your materials. If your single screenshot or the first 5 seconds of your trailer can encapsulate intrigue, it will do the heavy lifting of discoverability for you, and then it will be up to your game to do the rest. And some examples of this would be Hello Neighbor on the left. It's Pixar meets Hitchcock in a breaking and entering simulator. You're a kid breaking into your creepy neighbor's house. In the middle, we have Graveyard Keeper, which is Stardew Valley for goths, essentially. It's a cemetery management sim meeting capitalism. It's a crazy mix. And Party Hard on the right, where it's 4 a.m. and your next door neighbors are throwing a rager, and you head next door and literally kill the party, as in serial kill. And just like those movie log lines I showed you before, I truly believe each one of these elevator pitches plants just enough intrigue to jog your imagination. You're going to look a little further after you kind of hear these weird little mashups. These are all great examples from games that sold well, but as everyone in the room knows, a pitch alone is not the indicator of success, but it certainly helps. Hello Neighbor is a particularly interesting example. In October 2015, the studio Dynamic Pixels launched a Kickstarter with a $100,000 US dollars goal. That's about 145,000 Australian dollars in today's currency. And they launched this Kickstarter with a trailer I'm about to show you, which still ranks up there with one of the best game trailers I've ever seen. And watch how quickly it establishes the mood, the tone, and the stakes of the gameplay. Okay, I have a lot more slides, so I'm gonna cut it off early, but it's amazing. And it's all of that is done without a single written word or voice line, right? There was no text, you know what was going on, and all that intrigue was already there. Oh, let's not play that again. And yet, the Kickstarter reaches only about 13% of its goal. The pitch, however, is enough to get on TinyBuild's radar. So after the Kickstarter, TinyBuild picks it up. A year later, Hello Neighbor releases its first pre-alpha, the first of many alpha builds that catches fire amongst its audience. The version of Hello Neighbor that eventually released ended up quite different from this trailer. It very much fulfilled its pitch of being a Pixar-esque stealth and thriller game, but in the process of finding its gameplay and its rising popularity, made the end product more sandbox puzzle and stealth rather than the Hitchcockian horror of this amazing trailer. So Hello Neighbor, I would say, it does all those things I mentioned, like establishes your stakes and gives your tone and does it all before you even have to read a word or hear a voice line. But also that a pitch isn't everything. They had that amazing trailer and really didn't catch fire until a publisher came along and helped them out with more things along the timeline of development. The next and most recent career turn for me happened in 2020. So in that period of time where we sat at home and the world went still, I took time to reassess what I was doing. Writing was my first love, and I had written those 4 manuscripts while doing my agency and publishing work. But my intention since the beginning was to work in development. So in the same way that I jumped into the abyss 10 years before and took that unpaid internship at a little-known company called Riot Games, I did it again at the end of 2020. I polished up my resume, answered a bunch of random Twitter posts of people looking for game writers, and I signed on to a few projects. I signed on to Perispera, Totemic, Not Tonight 2, and Pacific Drive.
Sorry, what was the top right one called?
That is Totemic, previously published by Humble Games. And throughout my career, no game I worked on has been a better lesson of tell the story before a single written word than Pacific Drive. It has been the biggest demonstration to me of how much your audience responds to a clear and present vibe before they ever touch your game. Let me paint the picture of Pacific Drive to you. It's like a backing audio. Can you hear that? It's rain. It's late at night, and you pull up the roll-up garage doors and settle in for a night wrenching away at your old station wagon. A storm rolls in, and the pitter-patter of rain on the metal roof tiles overhead drums a constant beat. You fiddle with the loose knobs on the beat-up portable radio until an old garage rock tune from the 90s crackles on over the speakers. It's you and your headlamp and your wrenches, a film of grease covering your fingers. Suddenly, static drowns out the music, and you hear a metallic screech in the distance. It's far enough that you know it's not inside your garage, but you can't see past the row of trees crowding the edge of your property, and you wonder, what's out there? Ooh. Pacific Drive is a lot of things. It's a gameplay-first, survival, driving, run-based game. And like my earlier example of what a League player can tell you about its characters, Pacific Drive players will talk your ear off about the time they were running towards the extraction point, but an abductor anomaly grabs onto their car and drags it into a storm. Or the time they ran out of gas when the mother of all windstorms hit, and suddenly a barrel of gasoline comes flying through the sky and gives them the fuel they need to escape. Those are the players' personal stories about their drives and experience in the game. So where does the game's storytelling fit in? All of that I told you is just straight gameplay. There are 2 creative pillars that make up the framework of Pacific Drive's mood. The first on the left is the very distinct vibe of the Pacific Northwest in the United States. It's the elbow grease of a car mechanic. It's the sepia-tinged nostalgia of the 90s. The lone road trip through the woods where you're not sure if your duct-taped car will survive the trip. You may recognize this particular American Northwest flavor from Twin Peaks or Gravity Falls, and yes, Twilight. It's small towns, it's Bigfoot sightings, it's stories told around a campfire about things that go bump in the night. It's about your ears and eyes playing tricks on you in the wilderness, when a branch snapping in the distance could be from a light breeze or Bigfoot crashing through a meadow, when the shadows grow long and you start seeing things in the crook of a tree. And the second creative pillar on the right is the SCP-esque weird fiction aspect of the game. A major inspiration for the game was Roadside Picnic. It's a book written in 1972 by Soviet-Russian authors Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. It popularized first contact and exclusion zone fiction and inspired a whole collection of work that you might know. The movie Stalker, the game Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl, the Annihilation film, and the Southern Reach book trilogy. I'm getting some nods. This story and so much of weird fiction in particular is about unseen horror or about a sight or sound that is so terrible, so otherworldly, that it defies your senses and it defies your reason sometimes. And you'll see these two pillars everywhere in the game, and here's a few examples. Starting with the atmospheric environment, you'll run into an assortment of weather patterns true to the Pacific Northwest. You'll have rain ranging from a light patter to a full-blown thunderstorm, foggy days ranging from slight overcast to only being able to see a meter in front of you. You'll be surrounded by these Douglas fir trees as far as the eyes can see. You'll drive down lonely roads and long abandoned buildings where you'll never see another soul. And on the weird fiction side, you will get chased down by these things we call instability storms. That's that red stuff in the sky. They are sweeping storm fronts that bring wind and flame down on you and reconfigure the world around you. You'll navigate around devastating otherworldly sights that should not exist, like this giant gravity-disrupting anomaly that came and destroyed an entire town decades ago. In the game's world, you'll slap together tools in a MacGyver sort of way. You'll weld together scrap metal and salvaged motors. Your haven and your base of operations is an old garage, which slowly turns into a mad scientist's lab as you build out more outlandish inventions for your car. On the weird fiction side, you will see all sorts of twisted environments in the world. Swamp coral that blooms, then you can collect it. Strange energy orbs called anchors that when you pluck them, start a cascading effect in the world that summons anomalies to your location. On the design side, the game is designed for you to spend hours poring over every part of your car. Every tire, car door, bumper, roof rack is a separate item that you can upgrade and paint and slap decals on. Over time, your car will develop quirks, which are these fun little eccentricities that manifest in a car door popping open anytime you hit a pothole, or my personal favorite, when you turn on your windshield wipers and the fuel gauge needle is synced to it. It's very blurry, but you can kind of see it going there. This is the best. I think it's so funny. And then on the weird fiction side, the world is populated with anomalies, hazards that manifest as part-stealing robots or crash dummies that follow you when you're not looking and also sometimes explode. And lastly, these pillars come through in the audio as well. There's the soundtrack of 90s punk garage rock folk songs from all these artists that are based in the Pacific Northwest. Occasionally, as you drive, your radio will pick up snippets of conversations or old radio programs from the airwaves, anything from people giving radiation reports to boring tree facts to people looking for lost loved ones. And on the weird side, our audio team, A Shell in the Pit, did an insane job with the anomalies and the sound design in general. Each anomaly has custom sounds that are part biological or part mechanical, depending on what they look like. And the audio design deserves its own talk entirely, but here's a quick taste of the this little guy. It's kind of hard to hear. Is that like grinding noise? And it's really, if you got your headphones in, it is terrifying. And I am leaving the narrative examples for last because after seeing all those elements, you already have a pretty fantastic idea of what you're in for with the world of Pacific Drive. But those two creative pillars, the Pacific Northwest vibe and the weird fiction aspects, they are alive and well in the narrative too, to support the Alone in the Woods aspect and, quite frankly, an indie game budget. You never see the characters who help you through the game. You only hear them over the car's radio, and you can't talk back to them. It's a one-way transmission. In the game, you never see another soul, another person, another human shape. But the entire time you're going through this game, you're dealing with the echoes of the people who lived there, what they did, and the human cost of the choices they made. On the weird fiction angle of things, we filled the world with urban legends about the strange things that happen in this exclusion zone. You find out that the car you drive is a remnant. It's an old castaway object that binds itself to a person, and the victim, which is you're doomed to slowly grow more and more obsessed with this object, as you will as you play this game and you are poring over every part of your car. Also, every object or anomaly in the game is scannable. So when you do scan it, it's accompanied by a write-up that's styled as a government report or a encounter documentation. And instead of giving you a description of what you're looking at or maybe how to fight it or counterplay it, all you read is like a head scratcher about a human's encounter with it decades in the past. We leave it to you to fill the gaps of what you're dealing with and kind of write the fiction in your own head. And harkening back to the point of my talk, which is telling the story before a single written word, all of these elements work together to convey the world in every screenshot, soundscape, and gameplay moment. You can ignore all of the spoken dialogue in the game and still understand intimately what the world is about, what the zone is, about its anomalies, and how the zone in the world just doesn't care about you, and how you're surviving amongst the old and discarded. And most importantly, how all that conveys, most importantly, all of that vibe is, players can instantly attach onto it. They can see it from a screenshot or a trailer and fill in the gaps with their own imagination. So Pacific Drive shipped in February of this year. We've sold over 600,000 units in the first 5 months, and the team is trucking along with content updates. We've added a photo mode and game modes and new cosmetics and all sorts of fun things. But for me, I was burnt out like I've never experienced before. So when I mentioned my turn back to game development and narrative in 2020, I mentioned 4 projects that I worked on at the time. There was a 5th. 4 of those projects shipped, and I'm proud of my work, but that was in no way sustainable. I found that I could do a lot of simultaneous projects with my marketing and PR and publishing work, but I couldn't do that when it came to creative output. So it's taken me up until now about 8 months to poke my head up over the edge of burnout and allow myself to think about what's next. And what's next for me is finishing my next novel, a young adult fantasy book that I aim to get published, and also prototyping my own game. And all the while, I'm going to do what I said from the very start. I'm going to write my pitch first, and I'm going to tell the story before I write a single word. I'm at the end of my time, so I just wanted to close with 2 personal notes. Firstly, I think it's so easy to skim lessons off the top of the most successful games I've worked on and be like, there it is, the silver bullet that caused this game to make millions. But truthfully, every project is a mashup of best guesses and willful confidence. We didn't know for sure that any of these things would work, and you never really do. But along the way, there are signs that trend upwards. Those signs are the things you can train yourself to look for, trackable wish lists, good mock reviews, press write-ups, words of mouth. You can see if things are catching fire or not. You want to recognize the genuine signs that what you're doing is working, but you also want to know what the signs look like when you're not there yet. So you keep that all in mind. You hone that pitch until the pitch can sell itself, and that way you can try to turn hindsight into foresight. I would say, in closing, use these tools, test for signs of uptake, and be really willing to throw it away until you catch lightning. And secondly, in a few months, I'm coming up on 15 years of working in games. So I really want to give a heartfelt thank you to SAV, to GCAP, to all of you specifically for letting me talk about my career. My experience at Riot was when the game was still up and coming. And so between leaving abruptly and working on R&D projects I couldn't talk about at the time, I never had the chance to talk about my work and digest the foundations of what we were creating. And getting to contrast that with writing Pacific Drive, as well as all my experiences in between, has truly been a gift. So thank you for sitting through my stories. Hope you found something rewarding and applicable for your own careers from it. And I will be around all of Games Week this week. So if you see me, please say hello. I'd love to hear about what you're doing and learn more about the industry here in Australia. Thank you.
hang out with me if you want. Thank you so much. Can we get another round of applause, please? I am incredibly grateful to have heard that from you, and also just got to sit and watch some Pacific Drive stuff. So, not Pacific Rim, sadly. So if you can do that after your next novel, that would be great.
No problem.
Thank you. Before I let you all out, a reminder that our Xsola Game Social is going to be kicking off in about half an hour. We are transforming the hallways currently as we speak, so you can get some delicious desserts, non-alcoholic drinks, and play some games over in the Meet to Match space. Join us at 5:30 at the Xsola booth for a few short words to kick us off for the night. We would like to express our immense gratitude to Xsola, who are helping us deliver this low-key fun networking night for you. Please join us for that. It'll be running from 5:30 till 7:30, so you can go get dinner afterwards with a short introduction from Xsola. See you there.